Welcome back to another Field of 68 mid-major top 25 show. I am Sean Paul, joined by Kevin Sweeney. Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself to the people?
Yeah, Kevin Sweeney. I write for Sports Illustrated now. So maybe people think I'm above the mid-major world, but I'm not. I kind of grew up in it. For those that don't know the whole story, I basically fell in love with college basketball in 2009, 2010 when Siena was really good and they were right in my hometown. They beat Ohio State in the tournament, Vanderbilt in the tournament. And those Fran McCaffrey teams were special. And that was how I got into college basketball. It's where I started my writing was all mid-majors. So I'm still well abreast of the situation. So don't think I'm too big time for this, Sean Paul.
And I'm definitely pleased to have Kevin on here. And let's start it out with your three headlines of the week. Kevin, what do you got?
Sure. Yeah, I think the first one is COVID scheduling, right? I mean, we don't really need to get into too much of like what's happening as a whole. We've got, some work to do to get things back on track. But I think, the biggest thing is that, there have been some missed opportunities. In the last week, Loyola had a game against Davidson out on a road, likely Q1 game that they could have used to really solidify their at-large path. Iona really needed that game against Seton Hall. I know we don't cover the Mountain West in this, but Colorado State had one with Alabama that got wiped off the board as well. So, I think you're starting to see the impact of it on schedules. And I think for mid-majors where you don't get many opportunities, missing those at-large chances are big. And, I've started to hear from some coaches who are starting to put together essentially partner teams where they can say, hey, if we're open in February, let's play each other and create kind of a bracket buster. And we'll see if those actually come to fruition. But it's something that I think is being discussed around college basketball. It's like, how can we make sure we boost our resume? So that's my first headline. Headline number two, how about the Abayomi Iola revenge game? I mean, talk about an unbelievable story. He spends 2 years at Arkansas. He plays one total minute in 2 years, transfers back down to Hofstra, and has an unbelievable game, maybe the best game of his career on the road after some like really weird travel for Hofstra. I think he had 18 and 14. I just want to pull that number to be 1,000% sure.
Big time game for sure.
What a sweet feeling for him and for Hofstra as a whole. I mean, Aaron Estrada was really good. The transfer from Oregon, who started his career at St. Peter's, he had 18 and 14 and was just huge in that game. So good for Hofstra, good for Speedy Claxton. They deserve a lot of love because they've had a tough schedule, kind of a underratedly difficult one with some of the teams they've played. Obviously, Houston and Arkansas, but also Maryland and Richmond and Iona and Stony Brook, like conference favorites. Princeton, like those are good league. It's a really good team, Hofstra. And then my third headline of the week, how about Steve Lutz and Texas A&M Corpus Christi? 10-2 on the season. They were 2-19 against Division I competition a season ago. Willis Wilson, a legend, certainly, but I think it was time for a change. And Coach Lutz has done a really, really nice job with a new looking group, and they'll be a contender in the Southland.
My headlines of the week, I'm going to start off with a mid-major showdown between two teams that we could see in the tournament. But the biggest thing was a matchup between Tevin Brown and Malachi Smith. Malachi Smith dropped 36 points while Tevin Brown dropped 33 points. Murray State edges out Chattanooga. And Murray State looks to potentially have an at-large resume. They'll have another piece to build on that this week against Auburn. I speak to Murray State head coach Matt McMahon later in the show, so you'll see that. We discussed that a little bit here. And then the next one, I'm going to go with Western Illinois continuing their winning ways. They've been really good this season. They're one of the biggest surprises. We'll talk some more about some surprises later, but they are probably the biggest surprise in my mind right now, just touching on it a little bit. Trenton Massner, Colton Sandage, Will Carius, Luka Barisic, all shooting 35% or better from outside. They could be real contenders in the Summit League this season. They've looked really good so far. And then the third headline is going to be San Francisco. They did lose a game. They lost to Grand Canyon. They had their worst shooting performance of the season, but their defense kept them in it. They only scored 48 points, but it wasn't a blowout. They lost by one. They had a chance to win on the final possession. Then they go on the road still the next day and play at Arizona State, a team that won at Creighton earlier in the week, and they were able to edge out that victory by one on three made free throws at the end of the game. So that was another big win for San Francisco. And I guess that leads us into the poll this week. we have a first on the Field of 68 mid-major top 25 show. Loyola Chicago is first, not for the first time. They've been probably more than anybody, but they are the first unanimous number one. All 11 voters that voted this week voted for the Ramblers to be number one, including myself. I want to see what you think about the Ramblers. That's a program you follow closely out there in Chicago. They've won a lot under Drew Valentine so far this season, but they won differently. What have been the biggest differences between Drew Valentine and Porter Moser?
I think the first thing, I've said this on a few different platforms, and it's just obvious, keep being around them as much as I am. Drew Valentine isn't trying to be Porter Moser 2.0. He's trying to be Drew Valentine 1.0. And I think that's so critical. I think the thing that made Porter special was he was 1,000,000% confident in his program and who he was and the guys that he needed to recruit. And I think it's the reason why he's having early success at Oklahoma is he's not trying to run the same race as everybody else. He's not doing what Shaka Smart did and trying to completely change who he is to go match the institution. He's bringing the institution to Porter Moser, and I think you're seeing a similar thing with Drew. Like, yes, a lot of the same principles of this program, right? The discipline, the culture, all those things that made Loyola special, those still exist, but they do it in a different way. I mean, this program is a little cool now. Like they've got the best sneakers in college basketball there in Jordans and Dunk Lows everywhere. And they're running around Chicago recruiting events, and they're young, they're energetic. And then I think, on the court, I think the thing that they've changed quite a bit is they want to play a little bit faster and they want to take more threes. And a lot of that's not having Krutwig, right? I think when you have Cameron Krutwig, it's, you wait for the old man to get up the floor and let him distribute it from the high post and cut and, just do all the stuff that they did that allowed them to have success, because Krutwig was an All-American type. I mean, he was a special player. And I think, schematically, you've seen Drew go to some more kind of spread ball screens. You see them play more through their guards. They've let Schwieger, actually, he's been a huge add, the Princeton transfer. They let him isolate on the block and score from the mid post. Like, they just do a lot of different stuff. They're up there in 3-point rate. They have all these guys who can handle the ball, and they're dangerous in transition too. Uguak and Marquise Kennedy in particular have been really good in those spots, and just everyone really bought in at a high level. So I think you see a lot of the same things that made Loyola special, right? The discipline, the togetherness, but they're doing it slightly differently by, taking more threes, playing a little bit faster. And I think you see the confidence in the players in Drew. And I think that's why they've been so successful so far.
Yeah, Kevin, along with Greg Waddell and Carter Elliott, spoke to Drew Valentine the other day on After Dark on the Field of 68 on Friday. So if you haven't checked that out, you definitely should, because it was a great show. They spoke to Drew, great show there. And then looking down at the poll, some more Monmouth sneaks into the top 10. They've had a great season so far. They look like real contenders in the match. Var Reynolds, George Pappas with 30 points yesterday in their victory. Walker Miller has been one of the best transfers in college basketball based on going from a walk-on at North Carolina to being a high-impact player for Monmouth. This is kind of what I want to see what you think about, because you're a big MAC guy. If you had to pick, I mean, obviously it's Iona and Monmouth for sure at the top two. If you had to pick one, who would you say is going to win the league?
I think Iona's the better team. I mean, look, I have a lot of respect for what King Rice has done with this group. I think obviously Miller's been a game-changing addition to what they already had. Like, that was the one hole on that team last year, was they didn't really have a center. And Miller has done a great job of, being a post presence, but also fitting in kind of skill-wise and being able to stretch the floor. I think they're a good basketball team. I think Iona's a little bit better. And I also think at the end of the day, right, like, if you match up these two teams, one of them is Rick Pitino and one of them is King Rice. And that's not a knock on King Rice. That's Rick Pitino. It's just who he is. So I think Iona's a little bit more talented, and I certainly think better coached. So I think the fact that there is a team that we can, have a conversation about is a good thing for the league. I think the league as a whole has been better than expected. Fairfield's had I think a better start than I would have anticipated. Manhattan's been a little bit tougher. You start to see some teams starting to come along. Quinnipiac, I think, is making some strides. Marist, Siena started really slow. They're playing a lot better basketball. As they get healthy, they'll be in the mix. So I think Iona and Monmouth kind of clearly 1-2 right now, but the 3 through 7, 3 through 8 has been, significantly better than it's been in the last couple of years. It doesn't feel like just kind of a race to 500 for everybody.
And Canisius, who really struggled to begin the season, pulled off a stunner against Buffalo.
Without
I didn't
Malik
see
Green.
that one coming. Yeah, I didn't see
Malik Green.
Yeah, I didn't see that one coming at all. Big time win for them. Against a really good Buffalo team who's been in the poll the entire season. They're still in it today at number 17 after that loss. So that's a really talented Bulls squad. Grand Canyon sneaks back into the poll after a week out. They beat San Francisco. They're definitely deserving of being back in. Jovan Blackshear had a huge game against the Dons. He scored 23 points. Big time experienced guard for Grand Canyon. And then looking at the rest of the poll, a few other teams that sneak in. Western Kentucky is back in the poll. They were in it at the beginning of the season. They started off really slow, but they look really good now. They've won 2 straight games, one against Louisville, one against Ole Miss. They've looked really solid both times. Jamarian Sharp, 7'5" big man, is the top shot blocker in the country, and he's really improved his offensive game. He's really fun to watch. So if you haven't checked out Western Kentucky, I would check them out for sure. He's must-watch television. And then a few other teams sneaking in. Hofstra, after their win against Arkansas, they sneak into the poll. You mentioned their non-conference schedule earlier. They played a pretty tough game against Houston. They didn't have Jalen Ray in the opener of the season. They took Houston to overtime without probably their best player. And then after that, they probably should have beat Maryland. They had the lead late with 2 minutes left. They led by 4 points. And in this win against Arkansas, they didn't have Zach Cooks, who's currently their leading scorer. So what Speedy Claxton's been able to do at year one at Hofstra has been very impressive. The Pride could definitely win the CAA this season, might be the favorites to do so at this point. And then looking at the teams who exit the poll, Charleston, Furman, Stephen F. Austin, and South Alabama, after they split with Tarleton State this week, they fall out of the poll. My final question about the poll to you: are you a believer in Western Kentucky, maybe not being as good as UAB and Louisiana Tech, but being in the mix because they have that talent? Getting Cam Justice back after he wasn't there to begin the season is big. Still no Keith Williams, but do you think at the end of the day they could compete? And with North Texas too, do you think they can be in that top 3 range?
Yeah, I was about to say we shouldn't sleep on Grant McCaslin.
Yeah, they're doing great too. Beat Wichita State. That was my upset of the week last week, and it happened.
Attaboy, Sean Paul.
There we go.
No, I think Western Kentucky's in the conversation without a doubt. I think the element that Sharp has changed for them is huge, and I think one of the unique things with them is they've got this incredible rim protecting defense because of Sharp, but they also never foul you, right? They're second in the country in opponent free throw rate. Like that's a really powerful combo for a defense, not letting people like take shots at the rim. And when they do get shots at the rim, you're not sending them to the line. Like that's gigantic. They have the shooting. I think McKnight is really good. Obviously he doesn't shoot it still. I think that's the one thing you wish you saw more from him. But his feel passing the ball, his last 3 games, he's 11, 10, and 9 assists, including 9 against Louisville. He's really good. So I think when you have that combination of McKnight and Sharp, and then surround him with shooters, it's enough to be right in the mix. I think they will be in that conversation come March.
And I teased earlier my interview with Murray State head coach Matt McMahon, so we're going to go to that right now. They get Auburn later in the week. So here's my interview with Murray State head coach Matt McMahon. Coach, coming off a weird year like last year, you guys went 13-13, just weird circumstances all around. But what were you able to take away from a season where you guys didn't meet your expectations?
Nothing. Not worried about it. It was a crazy year. We just went to work this spring to retool our roster, get our culture back to what it's been, and really just tried to move the program forward. We've got 2 great returning 2-time first-team All-League guys, and KJ Williams and Tevin Brown, and we're able to add some really good pieces around them. You've seen the emergence of Justice Hill, who's been fantastic for us this year, and we've got a great group. Been a lot of fun to coach these guys.
You mentioned Tevin Brown. He is likely to be the all-time 3-point leader in OVC history, all-time leader in Murray State history, 3-point shooting wise, and will likely be a top 10 scorer in program history. What does a guy like that mean to the program?
Well, he's a great competitor. First off, he's a guy what you're going to get every single day. Really, and he's gets a lot of credit for his shooting, and rightfully so. He's an elite 3-point shooter, but he doesn't get enough credit for how smart he is. He's got great basketball intelligence, moves well without the basketball. He'll also finish top 10 in school history in assists. Very unselfish player. He's a great defensive rebounder, had 9 defensive rebounds in our win over a really good Chattanooga team on Saturday. He'll rank up there in steals as well. Usually guards the other team's best perimeter scorer. So just such a versatile player, really impacts winning in a lot of different ways.
Speaking of facing really good teams, you guys went on the road a few weeks ago and beat Memphis. Kind of a two-part question. The first one being you guys were down 14 at the half. Looked like Memphis had all the momentum heading into halftime, but you guys came out unfazed. What was it like in the locker room at halftime to turn things around?
Well, Sean, in the game, we really struggled with turnovers in a stretch where Memphis hit us with a 17-2 run to end that first half. And a lot of it were self-inflicted wounds on our part, turnovers that led to easy runouts and dunks. And so we were able to clean that up in the second half. We had been in a similar situation against a James Madison team early in the season where we were down 10 with a minute to go in the first half and came back and ended up winning by double figures. I thought our guys learned a lot from that experience. But overall, I thought our players just stayed the course, came in at halftime, made the necessary adjustments. And, Memphis is a great shot blocking team with Duran in there. And I thought we passed up some open looks in the first half. And in that second half, guys really stepped up and made shots. We went 10 of 15 from three on the road at the FedEx Forum. Juice Hill and Tevin Brown, had two historical performances here at Murray State.
Second part of that question, what does a win like that mean for the program? Going on the road, beating a team with some of the most talented players in college basketball, a team that just beat Alabama in the same arena the other day. What does a win like that mean?
Well, it was big for us for a lot of reasons, Sean. Number one, you mentioned it, just beating a really talented team. A name program, a national brand, just continue to grow the Murray State brand across the country. But then number two, it's been such a critical recruiting area for us over the years, and you can go back decades. But even here of late with Cameron Payne, who's doing great things with the Phoenix Suns now, Jonathan Stark, who was the player of the year in our league. We just signed a 6'6" guard, Justin Morgan, who's going to be a really good player for us from Memphis. And then, obviously the Ja Morant factor, having him there with the Grizzlies. So for a lot of reasons, it was a special win for our program.
Over the past couple of weeks in all sports, NHL, NBA, college basketball now, COVID cancellations are starting to come back a bit. Is that something that worries you as a head coach?
I'm not concerned with it. We're just business as usual. We'll continue to be smart, but we're just going to keep working hard and preparing to get ready for conference play after Christmas.
On Wednesday, you guys head on the road and play a top 15 Auburn team. What's the preparation when you go on the road and face a team like that?
Well, it's a great opportunity for our team. They're really good. It's been a neat series for us. We're very appreciative of Coach Pearl. He's the only coach who's brought a Power 5 team to Murray State since our arena opened back in 1998. So this is the final game of the series. I have a lot of respect for their program. They play so hard, obviously very talented. But for us, we'll keep the focus on Murray State, just trying to keep getting better. We've got some tough dudes. I expect us to go in there and compete against a really talented and hard-nosed team.
Thanks again to Murray State head coach Matt McMahon for joining me on the Field of 68 Mid-Major Top 25 show, and we'll get right back to the show after this. Thank you to Murray State head coach Matt McMahon for joining the show, and now we will return to the Field of 68 Mid-Major Top 25 show. This one, we're going to go into some of the surprises, the biggest surprise in your mind of the mid-major season so far. Who are you going with?
Man, I think it's really hard. I think there isn't one kind of Iowa State story, right? You think of, or I think Drake would have been that last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the biggest surprise would probably be that Western Illinois team you mentioned before. I thought that maybe they were, trending positively. Obviously, I think Rob Jeter was a great hire, but the fact that they are 9-2, right? Like, again, that's a program where winning 9 games all year is a statement. I think Western Illinois and Chicago State are like two of the best stories in the league, in the country, because those schools, like 10 wins has been the standard of like excellence. And both those teams are, 5 wins, Chicago State's standard of excellence. And both those coaches are well on their way to passing that. So I think Rob Jeter deserves a lot of credit. They hired the right staff, and you kind of expect that this thing was going to go right. But they've got a weird collection of guys. They've got Southland transfers and Division III transfers and Chicago kids all kind of thrown together. And so far it's worked. So just give them a shout out. They've done a great job.
They're part of why the Summit League is awesome, because they all shoot threes. They all make a lot of threes. They aren't great defensive teams for the most part, but it's fun basketball, and that's why I love the Summit League. My team that's a surprise, though, I don't expect them to win the Southern Conference, but they're doing better than I think pretty much anybody expected them to be, and that's going to be Samford. They've been 9-2 so far. The metrics still don't love them, but they've had some good wins. They won against Oregon State. They competed with Belmont there for a little bit. Quest Glover, the Florida transfer, has been one of the more productive guards in the country. He's been a big-time player for Bucky McMillan in his second season. Samford's the kind of team that I don't expect to beat Chattanooga or beat Furman, but they can steal a couple games here and definitely scare some Southern Conference teams in the league tournament. So that's a team I would definitely pay attention to down the stretch of the season here. And going into the game of the week, what do you have for the game of the week?
And there's some decent ones. Surprisingly, obviously Christmas week is usually pretty quiet, but I penciled in Hofstra Monmouth. I just think two teams trending up. It's a kind of local game that is great to get played, right? CAA versus a MAC team. I think it's just awesome. And the guards are really good in this game. They can all create shots. You've got this weird big mismatch where you've got Miller, the stretch big, versus a guy and Loyola, who's going to kind of pound you on the interior. So I think the matchup's really good. It's two teams trending up. It's two teams that can contend in their respective leagues, and Monmouth looking to stay undefeated against the spread. So that'll be that's its own storyline.
Yeah, 12-0 against the spread. That's definitely pretty impressive so far for Monmouth. But for my game of the week, I'm going to go with the first round matchup, one of the first round matchups of the Diamond Head Classic in Hawaii. It's going to be Liberty and Northern Iowa. Both teams were ranked in the poll to begin the season. Both have had pretty weird seasons. Northern Iowa might be the most confusing team in all of college basketball. Some games they look like they could win the Valley, and some games they look like they could finish 8th in the Valley. AJ Green's really gotten it going lately, and they won at Marshall the other day, but they've had some games where they just haven't looked good at all. They looked really solid against Arkansas. They almost won that one. They won at St. Bonaventure, but there's games where they just do not look good. Cole Henry's been stepping up big time with Austin Fife coming back from injury. So Northern Iowa looks solid. They shoot a lot of threes. If they're able to make those threes, I think they could definitely be competitive in this one, as Liberty can. They like to slow the pace. They like to shoot threes. Darius McGee is one of the best guards in the country. He's just a knockdown scorer. But Liberty doesn't have the players around him like they did last year. They don't have a Chris Parker. They don't have an Elijah Cuffey. So the team around him isn't as good this season. But the supporting cast for both teams are a little questionable. But you have the 2-star guards, which I think makes this a very intriguing matchup. And both will advance and play some pretty solid teams throughout the Diamond Head Classic. The winner gets the winner of Wyoming and Stanford. So that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. I'm not really sure who wins. I think I'd lean Northern Iowa, but that's one I would definitely pay attention to this week, because who knows, if both get hot, they could win their respective leagues. But now heading into my favorite segment of the week, the upset of the week, I've gotten 2 in a row correct. Murray State over Memphis and North Texas over Wichita State. Can I make it 3 in a row? Let's see, but we're going to find out what Kevin's upset is first.
I don't know how much of an upset it is at this point, given that the Beavers are now 1-10, and their one win was a 9-point victory over Portland State,
where they trailed at half too.
Yes, I will take Nichols to beat Oregon State. I think, first off, I'm a huge Austin Claunch fan. I just love the job he does, the way that he engages his guys, the way that he evaluates and finds players to come to a really difficult situation. It's one of the harder places to recruit to in Division I, one of the harder places, in the country. There's the budget's small, and they win every year. And, I think, this year they've given a real fight to Wisconsin a couple of days ago. They were in the mix. They were beating TCU at halftime. They won at Northern Iowa. I mean, this is an excellent basketball team. It really is. So I think they find a way to win this game with their guards, with Ty Gordon and Devontae Carter, and then, their athleticism up front. I think it's enough to beat this really miserable Oregon State basketball team, which really better win this game, because if they don't,
1-11.
When is the next win coming? I guess Sacramento State on the 28th. You'd think they probably win that one, but at this rate with COVID cancellations, they're a COVID pause away from staring down like a 2-win season. So
Yeah, going from Elite Eight to one win almost in January is pretty crazy. I mean, I didn't expect that to happen, but that's college basketball for you. That's why we all love the sport. Crazy things happen every year. But my upset of the day, upset of the week, speaking of crazy things that happened last year, I'm going with Oral Roberts to beat South Dakota State. Summit League play starts this week. If you
This
know
is
me,
this
if
is
you know
bad.
me, I'm talking about Oral Roberts because, I mean, they're good again. They've struggled at times, but they've gotten it going recently here. And they beat Ohio State last year, but it's more about what they are this year. They don't have Kevin O'Banner, sure. They still have Max Asmus. They have 5 players shooting above 40% from deep. Asmus being one, Isaac McBride, Trey Phipps, Francis Lotzis, and Deshang Weaver all shooting above 40% from deep. The defense isn't great, but neither is South Dakota State. They've lost a game to Idaho. They've also beat Washington State in the same week. So they've also been up and down. I think both teams could definitely scare a team in the NCAA tournament if they get there. But for me, the real difference is Max Asmus, but expect a lot of scoring in this game. I think Oral Roberts could pull this one out on the road, but it'll be must-watch television in the Summit League because really every game in the Summit League is must-watch television. We all know that.
I don't know how you're picking against your boy Baylor Shireman. This is going to be difficult for you. You got your one heartstring with A. Smith and the other with Shireman. You don't know what to do.
Two of my favorite players to watch in the country. Summit League, probably my favorite league to watch in the country. So if you're going to tune into this show for the rest of the year, you're going to hear a lot of Summit League talk because it's a really fun league to watch if you like scoring, because that's what everybody likes. And that'll do it for this week's edition of the Field of 68 mid-major top 25 show. Thanks again to Kevin Sweeney for joining me. Thanks to Murray State head coach Matt McMahon for joining me. Happy holidays to everyone and stay safe.